Good afternoon, everyone. The same happens in my classroom. When I play music at the beginning and then stop it, naturally everyone gets quiet. It's lovely. So I want to welcome you to this absolutely stunning campus, to our launch event of the AI Awareness Speaker Series, Meet the Expert. And today, obviously, David will be talking to us about this, and it's going to be an absolutely amazing talk. This event has been booked up. On Monday, I think we had 230 people joining us, so most of them are online at the moment. So thank you all, online and offline, to joining us for today's event. My name is Nadine Werning, and I'm the organizer of this event, but it was a brainchild of me and a couple of colleagues. One of them managed to get here today, Ali. If anyone wants to talk about modules with a business link in AI, he's the one to talk to. Ali, wave at us. That's Ali. Thank you. So, when we move on, for the people online, again, we're very aware that you guys are there. David is going to be roughly talking for 45, 50 minutes. I'm looking at him, he's waving, he's agreeing. Then we're trying to make space for 10, 15-minute Q&A, and we will try to engage you online as well. My lovely friend Caroline is sitting at the back, and she's having an eye on the web chat, so you can text us any questions you might have. And just make sure we will try to answer as many as possible. But if there are questions we can't answer today, because there might be too many online, we already agreed with David that we will summarize the key themes, and over the next months he will send us a reply, and we will post the reply under the video of today's session on the website. So you will get an answer to your questions, you just have to bear with us a bit, because we're trying to manage time and everything else. So I hope that's okay. And the same applies to people in the room. However, you can attack David after the event and have a quick chat with him. What I need to highlight is we need you guys to register, because as you might know, this is the first out of 6 events. And for anyone online and offline who is coming here to potentially get a certificate about the speaker series, we would expect you to attend at least 4 out of 6 events. So that applies again to online and offline. And if you register with us, so you leave your name and email address, we can make sure and check that you attended often enough and send you the certificate to your email address by the end of the speaker series. But also, if you can, please answer the questions after that, because that helps us to potentially find more sponsors and communicating this event to the wider public. So the first 2 questions are only if you want the certificate, and the ones after is really for us to use for marketing purposes and to show that this was worth everyone's time. Because at the very end, you will see how many people were involved in making this happen. It's not just me, let's be honest. You can already see in the back, Hayden is taking the pictures for us, Craig is helping with AV, and Caroline is doing the Q&A chat. So a lot of people putting a lot of effort in. And that brings me to Hayden. Hayden doesn't look like this, but that was the best picture I could find without stalking him. If you look at the back in the room, he is taking pictures. If anyone doesn't want pictures taken from them, please just let him know. He's very kind, and he will make sure that doesn't happen. So, housekeeping. Housekeeping offline. The nearest toilet is when you go through the double doors and you turn right. And there is no fire drill planned. So if the fire alarm goes off, please move straight to the car park space. It's close where the area where we all meet is around the car park. You will see where people gather. So just walk safe to safety. Housekeeping online. If you do get kicked out from your Zoom link, don't you worry. There are enough people here working and making sure that you can rejoin the link. But also the session is recorded, so you won't miss out on anything. So now, over to David. I just wanted to quickly say, David is kind enough, he came over from London all the way, and he will give a quick introduction about himself. He's going to do it much better than I can. I did have some notes, but I left them over there. So I'm going to pass this over to David. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation and organizing all of these events. So yeah, just a quick introduction to myself. I've been working with kind of machine learning, AI, for probably going on maybe 12, 13 years, initially at Yahoo. And so that was some advertising, recommender system kind of stuff, but a lot of it was about content understanding, content recommendations for news. And then I've done machine learning related product work at Tribune Company, which is a big news organization in the US, and then at the BBC for 5 years at NewsLab. So I've been kind of doing this machine learning in the kind of the news space in an innovation capacity as a product person. And then I also have a kind of a small parallel academic career where I've been kind of working on research projects, including some fellowships and stuff on forms of computational journalism. So these are things like structured journalism, automated journalism, and so on. So what I'm going to go through here, it applies to media, and you kind of see the application to all kinds of media, but you're going to see a lot of kind of news-related emphasis here, which kind of reflects my background. Okay, so I'll just jump right in. So what I want to do here is to talk a little bit, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, about how we got to the kind of the moment that we're in. We're all in this special moment, which we will look back on, I think, for the rest of our lives as sort of, a special time when people just kind of woke up to AI. But how do we get here, and what exactly is this that we're wrestling with at the moment? And then we'll go through a series of examples of generative AI applied to automating certain tasks in news and in other forms of media. And those will kind of get progressively kind of interesting and exciting. We'll kind of build to some interesting video that kind of brings it all together. And then we'll kind of take a step back and look at, well, if these kind of this functionality that we're seeing here kind of continue, what might it imply? Like, what are some of the what ifs of where this is going? And then I'll finish up with just a couple of comments on some of the potential bad things and potential good things that might result from all this. So how do we get here? I'll just start, and apologies to anybody in the audience here who is very technical and who is aghast at some of the generalizations I'm going to make here. But I'm trying to kind of cover in a very general way, what all this stuff is. And I'll start with coding, writing code. Very, very simple. Here's a little piece of code. If A is equal to B, then do X. And if A is not equal to B, then do Y. So very simple. Coding's been around for, 60, 70 years, something like that, probably even longer if you go all the way back to the difference engine in the 19th century. And it basically requires us to understand the task that we're trying to automate. So the way this works is we understand the task, we describe the task in code. Here's this little task described in code, and then the computer does the task. It's that simple. Machine learning is a different kind of computation, and it works in a very, very different way. So you kind of set up this little network, and you show the network different inputs and outputs. So you're showing it inputs and outputs at the same time. And as you show it the inputs and outputs, it builds up these weights, these little strengths in certain routes through the network. And that's training, developing those weights. And then you get to the point where you can show it an input that it hasn't seen before, and it will give you an output, right? That's machine learning. This is a kind of machine learning, neural networks, deep learning. There are other kinds, but this is kind of the main event here. The thing with machine learning is, so machine learning works like this. You kind of have these collections of inputs and outputs, and then you build up these weights that convert the inputs to the outputs. And then it can stand on its own, and once it's kind of trained, once it's complete, the computer can convert new inputs that it hasn't seen before into outputs. And the key thing to appreciate here is that the thing with machine learning is it lets us automate tasks that we don't know how to do, that we don't understand how to do. So we understand how to do this task, and so we can code it with code, but we don't understand how to do machine learning tasks, but we can do them nonetheless computationally and automatically because we can train these networks. So let's look at an example of that. So let's look at training a model with images of cats and dogs. So just kind of stop and think for a minute. Like, when you see a cat or a dog, how do you know that it's a cat or a dog? Like, of course you know that it's a cat or a dog, but how do you know? Is it the number of ears? The fact that it's got a tail, it's kind of small and cute? Like, what exactly is the criteria? It's very hard to figure out how we know, what's a cat and what's a dog. And writing code to figure that out, specific instructions, how would you do that? And if you're looking at a cat like kind of face on or on the side or from behind, it's a really challenging thing to kind of describe in enough detail to write code. But we don't have to write code. If we've got a lot of data, images of cats and dogs labeled with cats and dogs, so the images are the inputs, the labels are the outputs, then we can train a model. And once we've got that model trained, we can show it a new image of an animal that it hasn't seen before, and it will produce an output, in this case, dog, right? We can take that same model and we can flip it around. And again, gross generalization here, and apologies to people who kind of know the details behind this. But essentially, this is the same model, trained the same way. But now, instead of putting in an image and getting out a piece of information, we've put in a piece of information and we're getting out an image, or more specifically, a statistically representative image of the information that we put in. And so this is the interpretive versus generative use of machine learning, of deep learning, basically. And in technical terms, it's encoding and decoding, roughly. And just as a qualifier, that image required a lot more than dog as its input. But that input, when we're talking about generative use of deep learning, that input is the prompt, and then the output is the response or the completion, or there's various terms for it. So 2 kinds of computation, coding and machine learning, 2 kinds of machine learning, interpretation, and then generation. And so we talk about generative AI, but that interpretive part is kind of part of this parcel here. Okay, this works with text as well. So you can think of text, the inputs and outputs, as kind of self-tagging or self-labeling. The way it typically works, the way it works is that you basically have the input as a big block of text, say 100 words of text, for example, and the output is the next word. And then you train on that, and then you can get to a point where you can show this model a block of text and predict what the next word is, and then move along 1 word and predict the next word, and then move along 1 word and predict the next word. That is all that's going on behind these large language models, except that the scale at which this happens is so vast, and the amount of training material is so vast, that all of this complex, interesting, intelligence-like behavior that we're all so enamored with at the moment, that emerges from these models. But underneath it all, in terms of language, this is what's going on, just predicting that next word. So what this has done is enable this sort of scaled use of machine learning, of deep learning, both for interpretation and for generation. It's enabled a series of models, and these models are converting things to other things, inputs to outputs. And they're quite impressive. So the ones that we're all kind of caught up with at the moment, ChatGPT, are large language models. So these are text-to-text models. You type in a bit of text, you get more text out. There are text-to-image models. Those of you who have used Midjourney or DALL-E, DALL-E 2, DALL-E 3 now, Stable Diffusion, these are where you put in a bit of text, a prompt, and you get out an image for your prompt. Text-to-audio, we've had synthetic voice models around for a while, and those have become vastly better in terms of their quality. We've also got synthetic music generation. You put in a little bit of text. I want a theme song for a cowboy movie that has a romantic part or something. Boom, there's some music for it. You can do text to audio, whether it's voice or music or so on. Text to video. You can do this as synthetic avatars, the so-called deep fakes, where you kind of make somebody say something, or make a synthetic image say something. We'll see some examples of those. Or full-on video, where you basically put in a little prompt, describe I don't know, a person walking down a street, and there's a bit of video of a person walking down the street. We'll see some examples of that too. And then, of course, the other way, it's not all about text. Image to text. We have an event that happened last week, GPT-4 Visual launched. GPT-4 is actually a multimodal model, which means it's got images and text in the same model. We'll see some examples of that. This is where you can get description out of images. Audio to text, of course, machine transcription. If you're watching this on Zoom, getting transcription out of Zoom is kind of trivial now. That we've had this around for a while. But there are video to text models. There's like rumors that Google have a huge one, and there's one in China, the Wudao model in some institute for artificial intelligence in Beijing, where you can basically put in a bit of video and get out questions and interaction around text from that video. And beyond media, there's kind of other large pools of use of this. A big one is at Tesla. So Tesla full self-driving, that model, and then they've kind of moved all that over into this robot they've got, this Tesla Optimo robot. These are essentially binocular video And the output is controls of the car, steering around the corners and not crossing the line and slowing down and all that stuff. And with their Optimo robot, they're looking at doing the dishes and hoovering the floor and all this kind of thing. And that's exactly the same basic principle, except it's applied in terms of this binocular video to controls. And just to get like wild and crazy here, there are experimental models that take high-resolution functional MRI, so these are little brain imaging things, very high resolution, and just through that turn it into text or turn it into images. And you can Google these projects, and they are stunning. They really are breathtaking. I mean, the image one, they basically kind of show people an image, and then they take the data from the functional MRI, and then just using that data, they can recreate the image that the person is looking at. So it just gets quite freaky here. We won't talk about that. We won't talk about the self-driving cars. We'll stick to media here. So these are not in labs or just available to sort of big companies and sophisticated data science teams and all the rest of it. These are available to everybody, everywhere, easily, right? So that whole list that I'm talking about in terms of media, there's just this whole kaleidoscope of little startups and some quite big startups in terms of funding that are offering these things. So it's not just ChatGPT. You can pay $20 a month and get ChatGPT Plus. Or Midjourney, it's also this whole long tail of little companies doing various anything to anything kind of models. And so there's this environment for creativity in using these models that's just starting. And I would really, encourage, if you haven't already, encourage people to kind of dive in and kind of play with a load of these tools. You'll see some examples a little later on here. So all of this is just beginning. This is a prompt and a response from GPT-2. So I first started playing with the OpenAI models in 2019. Summer of 2019 was when I got access to GPT-2. And here's a prompt for GPT-2. The prompt is, what is better, laptop or desktop? So not a very well-phrased prompt. And the response is, what's better, a desktop or a laptop? What's better, laptop or desktop? I am really wondering what the answer is. Posted on October 18th, 2017, 12:46, reply, number 21, the line, on and on and on. And so it makes a little bit of sense that you can see it's trying to do something, but it's not, it's copy and paste, right? It really is, this kind of mishmash. There's something going on, but it's nothing that you're going to be like looking at thinking, I can do something with that. It's a curiosity. This is GPT-4 with exactly the same prompt. So this is the prompt again. What is better, laptop or desktop? Response, the answer depends on your specific needs, as both laptops and desktops have their strengths and drawbacks. Here's a few considerations. Portability, laptops are generally better if you need mobility. They're designed to be portable and run on batteries, allowing you to use them almost anywhere. Performance, desktops typically offer more powerful performance. They have larger power supplies, more space for bigger and faster components, blah, blah, blah. Customizability and upgradability, desktops are easier to upgrade. They typically replace or add components, price and like if you had asked me to do a bunch of research and spend a weekend writing a response to that query, I couldn't do a better job, right? And that's 2019 to 2023. And so there's kind of some other evidence here that this is just getting started. This is from a paper from I think 2021, so it's a little old now, but it basically looks at the three kind of big contributors to these models. So this is the data size, the training data you have, which is in the middle. The compute, or sort of the amount of computer operations. These are in petaflop days. They measure this. That's the unit they measure this in. But it's how much computation you put on it. And then there's this parameter value, which is kind of like the little nodes inside, the little controls, little variables inside the model, which is kind of a thing that you kind of set up. And so what this graph, or these series of graphs look at is, well, the size of each of these, how much compute, how much data for training, how many parameters, and then what's called the loss function, or the test loss. And what you see is that the bigger these things get, the less error there is, or the less loss there is in the operations that they do. And that's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that that's a straight line. That is like a remarkably straight line. And those little dots you can see there, those are different models. And so what this means is that there may be some kind of predictable natural law here. I think this is a very big finding from these models that people aren't really appreciating. But something's going on here. And it means that we can predict not we, but I guess OpenAI and Google and so on, can predict what these models will do in terms of loss function. It's a little different when you're interpreting that into sort of day-to-day use. But they can predict how powerful they're going to be completely accurately, right? I mean, they can just say, right, if I'm going to have this much data, this much compute, this many parameters, the model's going to be able to do this. And that as long as that law holds, as that line continues, that's what it does. What this suggests is that there is no real limits to where this stuff goes other than essentially the availability of the training data and the computation you have available. The computation is very difficult and expensive right now because everybody wants to train models. This is why NVIDIA is $1 trillion company. But that's probably going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as they build up more capacity. So it's probably just training data that's the constraint here. So that's the only real limit here. And that, again, in turn implies that these tools may match or exceed humans in every task for which data is available at scale, which is a pretty staggering thing. So given all that, let's look at specifics. Let's look at examples, right? So what can generative AI do right now? So let's look at a simple example. Here is a conversation with GPT-4. There's a little prompt up top, and then I've pasted in the text of a news article. And the prompt is basically summarize the article. You are an expert journalist, an editor who is highly skilled at grasping the essence of news stories and rewriting them as succinct, accurate summaries, blah, blah, blah. And it produces a summary. I've asked it here to do a one-sentence summary that's suitable for a text alert. No problem. So most of you, I would hope, have used ChatGPT and have done kind of similar things. If you haven't, honestly, tonight when you get home, do it. But this is a very kind of familiar thing. So this is a newsroom function summarizing an article into a single sentence for a text alert, for example. Okay, so this also works with things like copy editing, so editing text, translation and verifying the translation, listing the factual claims that a piece of text makes. So, for example, output from a language model or something, a draft that somebody has written. What are the exact factual claims? Very, very accurate, very, very productive use of the models. Summarization as bullet points, summarization as a text alert we looked at, generating headlines, generating versions for newsletters, generating versions for social media posts, tagging, putting little bits of metadata on pieces of content that kind of indicate what it's for, what it does, or what it's about. Search engine optimization, a very big deal for online, for digital media producers. Rewriting for different audiences, so kind of restyling, rewriting, in this case for a younger audience, or turning articles into scripts, for example, or even just starting scripts from scratch, writing scripts from anything. Scripts are quite different for audio and video. Scripts are different than text written to be read, and more and more and more. So there's loads and loads and loads of tasks that these things can do. So let's, before we get into some of the more advanced ones, let's look at a data-centric one just to kind of show how kind of broad this goes. It's easy to kind of understand the text-related examples, but here's a data-related one. So this is the OECD. They produce country-level economic data, lots and lots and lots of detailed data about countries. And so what I've done is I've gone to the OECD website and I've downloaded data for 3 countries, the US, the UK, and Ireland. So I get an Excel file from the OECD, and then I just literally cut and paste the CSV file from that into GPT-4. So I've got a little prompt up there asking to use this data to write a comparative article comparing the economies of those 3 countries. And I've done nothing with that data, haven't done a thing. I've just literally cut and pasted it from the OECD website through the Excel file into here. Haven't even looked at it. And it will produce an article that when you, after the fact, kind of go through and check it all out, is absolutely accurate. Now that's, there's all kinds of risks here, hallucinations and not focusing on the right thing and all that. But again, as a person who's not a data journalist, the job that it does is better than I could do, and it really is just working off of the cut and paste data. So let's go through a more kind of elaborate example now. So I'm going to start with an article. So this is an article in Spanish from RTVE, which is the public service broadcaster in Spain. So first we're going to translate this. So this, GPT-4 is better, I guess, at translation than Google Translate. So Google Translate was this huge set of models that were built at enormous expense, and GPT-4 comes along as a general language model, boom, does a better job. That pattern is repeated in many, many different fields. Many parts of natural language processing, for example, are just gone, basically, because GPT-4 or big language models can do a better job. So translating is a very accurate function that GPT-4 can do. So I use GPT-4 to translate this Spanish article, and the article is about a heat wave. It's about a heat wave that's developing in Spain. So I take that article, now I've translated it into English, and I combine it with another article from RTE, the Irish Public Service Broadcaster, and this is about a report that the World Meteorological Organization has published around global warming and how Europe is heating up faster than the rest of the world. And so a longer cycle article from RTE. And then I've taken an article from the BBC, shorter, little pithy article, and it's about flamingos in this lagoon in southern Spain, whose lagoon is drying up because of climate change, and the flamingos have to migrate and go away somewhere else. And so three articles that are roughly about the same, kind of roughly the same domain area, but completely different articles. And I've used OpenAI to bring them together, to combine them together, to essentially extract the semantic information, the meaning from each of these articles, and put them together in one article. It does a very good job. It has this lovely little opening paragraph where it's got sort of a summary of each of the three articles, and it kind of weaves them together, and then it's got an elaboration of that, and then it's got sort of, digging into the background with the WMO report and the example, the present day of the heat wave that's building, and how this is affecting the flamingos, and then it kind of sums it up with an overview at the end pulling from all three articles. So it does a really good job. So I want to illustrate that article, and so I go to Midjourney, and there's a prompt, basically, to illustrate the heat wave in Spain. Show the prompt was an elderly lady in a heat wave in Spain. Here's the example. I wanted to illustrate the WMO report, so the World Meteorological Organization report about global warming or climate change and the temperatures rising faster in Europe than elsewhere in the world. That's what I got. And I wanted to talk about or illustrate the flamingos in the lagoon that's drying up in southern Spain. That's what I got. This is, first of all, wow. And also problematic, because these are not images, these are not photographs. That is not a nature photography. That wasn't somebody crawling out on the lagoon with a camera taking pictures of flamingos. It's all just Midjourney, right? And that's ethically quite challenging for journalists. So maybe you don't want to do that. But you don't have to do that. You can do the same thing with abstract illustration. So here's an illustration. I've asked it to illustrate warming European cities. And it's given me that. I've asked it to illustrate a heat wave in Spain. It's given me that. I've asked it to do a comic version of the flamingos. It's given me that. So I can probably illustrate an article with no ethical worries, but by using those illustrations on the right. So these tools give you lots of potential for illustrating content. Okay, so I can put those together. So what I can do is I can use GPT-4 to summarize the article, the combined article, in a series of 8 captions, little bits of text. And then I can also ask GPT-4 to produce prompts for Midjourney, which I then put into Midjourney, and I get images, and I've asked it to do this in a graphic novel kind of style, and then I can put the text from GPT-4 on top of the images from Midjourney, and I can turn that article into a graphic novel, basically, an 8-panel comic or 8-panel graphic novel. This is absolutely accurate. There's just no there's no error or problem with the text. Journalistically, this is completely adequate. So then I can take that article and I can ask GPT-4 to rewrite the article as a script. So remember, scripts are different than articles. They have different kind of characteristics. But I don't just want to do it for one script. I want to do it for 4 scripts. So I've asked it to do it for 4 scripts. One aimed at a traditional audience, one aimed at a young audience, one aimed at a children's audience, and one is poetry, just for fun. So I'm going to play. I'll play I've just done the first paragraph, the opening paragraph of the script. So I'll do that. I'll play it in its entirety for the first one, and then I'll just play little bits to get the gist of the other one. So here goes with this.
Temperatures are rising fast across Spain, topping a scorching 45 degrees this week and marking this season's first severe heat wave. This heat isn't just turning up the thermostat, though. It's also casting a shadow across Europe, which has been warming at double the global average pace since the 1980s, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Meanwhile, the flamingos at Spain's cherished Fuente de Piedra wetlands are also feeling the heat. A relentless drought has forced them to pack up and search for a new home.
So apologies for the cutting out there. There's a little technical issue going on here, but you can get a sense for the quality of that voice. So these new synthetic voices built on these kind of transformer-based models, they get the breath, they get the little intonations, they get the punctuation, they get the pauses. You can control them. You can have them whisper. You can do all kinds of things with these. It is not like the kind of mechanical sounding synthetic voices of even a few years ago. So just to be completely clear here, taken 3 articles from different organizations in different languages, brought them together into one article, used GPT-4 to turn that into a script, put the script into a synthetic voice, and had the synthetic voice read the script, and then illustrated it with some Mid-Journey art. So I'll just do a little bit of some of the others here.
Hey folks, guess what? The heat is cranking up in Spain. It's hitting a roasting 45 degrees this week, ushering in the season's first major sizzler. But this isn't just Spain getting attacked.
Hey kids, guess what? It's getting super hot in Spain right now. Imagine the highest heat you've ever felt, then add a bit more. We're talking 45 degrees.
In Spain, the sun's intense decree, a searing 45 degrees. Europe feels the heat's cruel jest, warming twice as fast as all the rest. The flamingos of this cherished land now seek new homes at drought's command. For hope, like birds in flight, we yearn, in this uncertain tale of our climate's turn.
Anyways, there we go. So, so what's happening here is you're kind of starting to see what happens when you take these anything-to-anything models and you kind of bring them together and kind of use them to produce, media that's kind of more than the sum of the parts. So it's not just audio, it's also video. So I'm going to show one kind of video here, which is essentially synthetic avatar video from three different tools. And this is one kind of text to video. So this is what you might have, the term deep fakes. This is what people typically mean by deep fakes, although I think that phrase is kind of a little past its sell-by date because, as you'll see, this stuff is pretty powerful. So the first one, which I'll play, is from a company called Synthesia. Let me just play that.
Temperatures are rising fast in Spain, topping a scorching 45 degrees this week and marking this season's first severe heat wave. This heat isn't just turning up the...
Hey folks, guess what? The heat is cranking up in Spain. It's hitting a roasting 45 this week, ushering in the season's first major sizzler. But this isn't just Spain getting...
Hey kids, guess what? It's getting super hot in Spain right now. Imagine the highest heat you've ever felt, then add a bit more. We're talking 45 degrees here. And it's not just a one-day thing, it's...
That last one, I had created that image in Mid-Journey, so I described the person that I kind of had in my mind that was speaking that voice, and then I put that into Mid-Journey, got a static image, like just an image, and then I used that tool called DID, to animate the image. And so that tool, DID, you can just put in any image and you can animate it as a synthetic avatar. So let's take it a step further with a different kind of text to video. So this is what's called B-roll in the news business, background kind of roll, little bits of text. And what I've done here are little bits of video. what I've done here is I've taken the 3 articles, turned them into the script. You're going to hear the traditional voice. That's the same one that we heard earlier. But what I've done here is I've taken a tool called Runway Gen 2, which is a text-to-video tool, and I've created little bits of B-roll, and I put all those together to illustrate with video the script. And then as a bonus, I've used an AI music generation tool to do a soundtrack for this from scratch. And I got to mention here that I have 0 musical ability. I don't read music. I don't play any instrument. I can't sing. I can barely listen to music. And so this is my effort to create a soundtrack for this little bit of video. So it's about 20, 30 seconds, so I'll play it in its entirety here.
Temperatures are rising fast across Spain, topping a scorching 45 degrees this week and marking this season's first severe heat wave. This heat isn't just turning up the thermostat, though. It's also casting a shadow across Europe, which has been warming at double the global average pace since the 1980s, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Meanwhile, the flamingos at Spain's cherished Fuente de Piedra wetlands are also feeling the heat. A relentless drought has forced them to pack up and search for a new home.
So there's lots wrong with this, right? Those are weird-looking flamingos for a start. But this Gen 2 thing and these kind of models, they're about 3 months old, something like that, 2 months, 3 months old. And you saw the graph, right? The add training data, add compute, add parameters, and you can kind of see where it goes. So this is just, again, when you bring these things together, you get this sort of, media effect that's kind of more than the sum of its parts. Do you want to make a feature film in an afternoon? I'll bet you within a year, if you're kind of bored some afternoon, you kind of had some playing around with these tools, I bet you can get pretty close. So this is a scene from, there was a portion of one of those stories, the one with the flamingos in southern Spain in the lagoon, and I wanted to sort of think, well, what could you do with a docudrama or a kind of a feature film around the drying lagoon? There was some stuff in that article about tourists not coming anymore and how that was impacting the local economy. So I put a prompt in here into Gen 2 with some characters, and I wanted it to be a local, an old man, a local man in the lagoon, and a tourist, an American tourist, and they're having this conversation, and that's what I got, and it's not very good, right? So that doesn't look like an American tourist. That looks like a desert more than a dried lagoon. I probably could have worked the prompt a little bit, got some better video, but that's kind of what I got. This is what I got from Midjourney. So Midjourney 5.2, much better. That's a dry lagoon. That looks like an American tourist. I mean, these are, it does a qualitatively better job. So the people at Runway, they're saying that they're going to be able to match the Midjourney quality within like 9 months, a year, or something like that. So I think it's just a matter of time before we have, text to video in that kind of quality, right? And then you can start to think, well, what can I do with scenes and continuity and all this kind of stuff, and maybe do some longer creative works. And the key to all this, of course, is writing. But GPT-4 is one heck of a scriptwriter for fiction as well as for news stories, and it's kind of fun. If you want to sit down with GPT-4 and play with it and use it like a writer's room. Get it to do jokes, get it to do little vignettes, little sort of gangster movie things, all kinds of fun. And it does, it's not going to match the best human scriptwriters, but it's better than I can do, and it's probably better than most people in this room could do. It really is impressive. So I think making a feature film in an afternoon, we're not that far away. I think we're going to see some surprising stuff popping up in not too distant future in that regard. So the next frontier, which basically happened last week. So GPT-4 has been out for a while, since April. But GPT-4 is what's called a multimodal model. It's trained with both images and text in the same model. And multimodal models, it was just the multimodal part had not been released when GPT-4 had been released in April. It was released last week in the US, still not available here in the UK. But it's called, GPT-4V is the name that's given to it. So it is a multimodal model, text and images. And what it lets you do is stuff like this. So this is from when they were launching GPT-4 back in April. They published some examples. So this is a prompt. It's got two parts. It's got a little text part and it's got an image. And the image is this, and the text prompt is, what is unusual about this image? And GPT-4 has responded, the unusual thing about this image is that a man is ironing clothes on an ironing board attached to the roof of a moving taxi. And that is indeed the unusual thing about that image. But just think about what's going on here. That model has looked at that image, and it has looked at that prompt, what is unusual about this image, and it has given that response. It has interpreted that from that image. And that is a breathtakingly impressive thing to do, right? That is non-trivial. And this is just text and images. There's multimodal models around in labs at the moment, and probably in the kind of Googles of the world, that are not. They're a lot more than just text and images. They're audio and video as well. So it's probably likely we're going to be able to see this kind of observation and analysis and interpretation on video. So another example of this, here's one. So when GPT-4V launched in the US, this was an example that showed up on Twitter that I poached from Twitter. It's a little cartoon, a little meme here. And the prompt, the text prompt is, what do you think this is the meaning of this image? And that's it. And this is what it produces. The image portrays the concept of group dynamics and perspectives. Specifically, in the first panel, each individual has a different shape in mind, but they all seem to think they're on the same page, as indicated by the text. It gets an error here. There's a hallucination here, which is in the second panel, when the actual shape, a square, is revealed. There's no actual shape, much less a square, revealed in the second panel. But other than that, it's evident that none of them are thinking about the same thing, leading to the moment of realization with the caption "Oh." That's correct, except that there's no revelation of a shape. And then everything else, the third panel description, the last panel description, is absolutely accurate. So it's looked at this just as an image, just as a JPEG, and it has interpreted that almost perfectly. One little kind of annoying hallucination, but otherwise fine. Here's a particularly useful example, again from Twitter. This is a very common thing in the US, at least, where you have to be basically a parking lawyer to figure out whether you can park there or not. So this person has just, because OpenAI have the little app now, he's just taken a picture and said, it's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m., can I park in this spot right now? Tell me in one line. And the response is, yes, you can park for up to 1 hour starting at 4 p.m. So that gives you an example of the kind of utility that's going on here. So this is I've done all these little examples here, most of them, but this is blowing up all over the place. This is old. Like the examples here, I just haven't had time to collect new ones. But there's sort of fashion examples where you've got like supermodels that can model like 3,000 pieces of clothes. You've got like an hour of stand-up comedy. This was a particularly interesting one, this Tom Brady It's Too Easy stand-up comedy special. Basically somebody, a big tech company, probably Google, got their hands on 100,000 hours of stand-up. I think unless you own YouTube, that's probably hard to get your hands on. And trained a model, and there was this podcast team in the US that kind of worked with them on it. And they did this 1 hour of stand-up comedy by Tom Brady, who's an American football player with a big, long, storied history of the Super Bowl. And it is hilarious. It's kind of American. You kind of have to get the American football nuances and everything, but it held my attention for an hour. And if there was another one, I'd listen to that. And that's stand-up comedy. So if you wanted an hour of Tony Blair doing stand-up comedy about the war in Yemen, you could do that, right? I mean, that's kind of what becomes possible here. I'll just play a little bit of it. There's a whole set of these new AI-generated kind of local radio stations that are popping up. I'll play one from an American one. There's one that's in the UK that's just, they're starting to broadcast in Devon and Cornwall. But I'll play one here from the US.
Been more enthusiastic, but there is a minority who say they won't participate. Love the wine they're with.
kind of missing.
And 100% voiced and powered by AI. This is Radio GPT.
So yeah, so basically it's one of these sort of local radios with all that kind of banter between the personalities, entirely generated by AI, including news bulletins and traffic alerts and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so where's all this going? I got to hurry up in the time here because I'm a little over. So where is all this going? Like it's all kind of I was going to say a little shocking. It's a lot shocking. It shocks me. So where's it all going? So let's look at some what ifs. So to state the obvious here, what if you can take stuff that used to require an organization full of people, illustrators and script writers and photographers and video people and just this whole media, news gatherers, reporters, all this stuff, big media organization. And what happens when you can have one person with a few subscriptions to some of these tools producing roughly the same kind of quality of some kinds of media? I think there's a lot of caveats there. We've got to be very careful. This is not going to replace everything. This is going to replace chunks of the environment. But what happens when individuals and tiny little teams can start to do feature films in an afternoon? So that's a big what if. What happens if customers control their own consumption experience? This is an app called Artifact that's been founded by the people that founded Instagram, the people that created Instagram. Kevin Systrom, I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyways, Artifact, hundreds of millions of dollars. This is part of their money from selling Instagram to Facebook, has been put into this. And what it does, it's an aggregator. It's a news aggregator. So you select an article. So this is an article I've selected here from Newsweek. And there's a little button on the top, excuse me, and you can turn the article into a summary. But if you don't want to have a summary as your kind of consumption experience, you can kind of go into the settings and you can choose simplicity, explain it like I'm 5. You can have an emoji version of the story if you want it. You can have it as a poem, right? We saw the poem earlier. You can have this article as a poem. So an article about Putin fires warning in Ukraine about F-16 fighter jets. Want it as a poem? Push the button, get it as a poem. Or you can have it in Gen Z colloquial style, which is a little lame. I think there's be some eye rolling there. So you can do all that, and you're choosing that yourself as a consumer. Newsweek didn't choose this. You choose this as a consumer. And if you want it as audio, so if you don't want to read, you can push the little button in the bottom there, and you can listen to the article. But you can choose who you want to read it to you. So you can pick different voices, including personalities. You can have Snoop Dogg read it to you. You can have Gwyneth Paltrow read it to you. There's some others in there too. So the point of this is that in the past, media was produced by somebody and then it was consumed in the form that it was produced by the consumer. And what this is showing, and there's other examples too, is that that's kind of not the case anymore. Media is produced, but then as a consumer, I'll decide how I consume it. And that's a pretty profound step. So here's another one. So we looked at the consumer control there. So let's look at generative search, right? So here is a tool called Perplexity AI. Same thing with Bing Chat or you.com. There's a bunch of these things. They're all really well funded, obviously. So Perplexity AI is a generative search tool. So I type in a query to this generative search tool. Tell me about the floods in Libya. This was when the floods in Libya were a big deal. And so the response here, which come from, 4, 5, 6 different sources. So 3 YouTube videos, a CBS News piece, an NBC News piece, and a Reuters piece. And they basically kind of summarize what's happening here. According to search results, there has been devastating floods in Libya. This is what we know. A major storm has caused 2 dams to fall in the coastal city. About a quarter of the city has been wiped out. The floods have caused thousands of deaths and 10,000 people are missing, feared dead, and so on. So very, very accurate, very clear and referenced results there. But here's the thing about this, is that response is created in response to my query. Just sort of comes into being when I ask for it. And I'll read it, consume it, and then it goes away. And it's not stored anywhere. It's not, it's just this sort of thing that's been brought into being just for that moment for me to consume and then goes away, right? And so that's kind of leading to this question here, and what we saw previously with the Artifact app, consumer control of consumption kind of goes there too, is well, what is the thing that a media producer, say a news producer, should produce if the output is not going to be consumed directly? It's going to be consumed by machines who are going to make experiences that are consumed, right? So what is the output that Newsweek, for example, should produce, if the whole point of what they produce is not that it's read or consumed directly, but it's used by, Perplexity.ai or Artifact to create an experience, summary, a video, an audio piece. And so here's the question here is like, what if the artifacts, the video, the audio, the articles become much less important in communicating news? What happens then? What happens if language becomes irrelevant in any medium? Language is kind of like rapidly not becoming a barrier, right? This is an example here from the European Broadcasting Union of a tool that they were pioneers in this. They have a really high-functioning innovation team. This is a thing called the European Perspective. And what they do is they take content from a whole bunch of different EBU, public broadcasting organizations around Europe, excuse me, in different languages, and they basically convert articles, video, audio between languages. So for the video, they're doing things like doing transcription, automated transcription on the spoken words in the video. They're doing translation on that, and then they're doing synthetic voices that are all matched up. And so there's lots and lots of other examples here. Google Translate itself is an example, but there's lots of there's real-time translation tools, apps commonly used. So what happens to media if language just kind of ceases to be a barrier for media? What happens if everyone has their own personal reporters, right? So this stuff can read and synthesize and analyze. And so if you look at kind of the world of people saying things and writing things and reports and audio and all the rest of it, what happens if you kind of have an AI that can read all that and synthesize all that and analyze all that? And what happens if you can produce from all that little kind of news summaries just for you? What happens if you have a tool that can just sort of look at the world or look at some portion of the world that you're interested in and read everything and watch everything and listen to everything and just bring that all down and give you your daily digest, right? What happens if you do that? What happens if Elon Musk does that, right? This is what X is doing. X, Elon Musk's X.com or X.ai, they're buying a huge amount of compute. They're going to train a huge model. They're going to use Twitter or X, I guess, as this sort of basis to sort of suck in all this information and kind of sort it all out and produce something. What is that? Like, what does that do for the world? So when you add all this up, what happens if the whole value chain for media changes, right? So in traditional media organizations, you had this sort of value chain where you originate content, say in news, you would do some news gathering or some reporting. You would produce content, you would create artifacts, you would write articles and make videos and make podcasts or whatever it is you were doing. You would distribute that, you would put it on your website, upload it to Spotify, whatever it happened to be. Platforms were involved in that, of course. And then the consumer would consume whatever they were consuming. And they would have to consume whatever you produced. As a media organization, right? Everything was controlled by the media organization. Well, what happens if that kind of dissolves, if the barriers or the kind of boundaries in the chain, the stages in the value chain kind of dissolve? We've seen that with the content consumption, with Artifact, for example. The content distribution, assembling these experiences by the distributor. So the media artifacts are kind of raw material for this distribution assembled experience. The production, individuals or small teams producing amazing content using all these tools. Or maybe the origination itself kind of being, coming out of networks or coming out of the environment as a whole through these tools. What happens if all that takes place, right? So these are just questions here. I don't know what happens, but there's a lot that we should, I think, all of us be thinking about where this is going. So very briefly, I'm going to finish up on what might go wrong and what might go right here. So what might go wrong? Loads of potential for harms here, obviously. Degradation of the ecosystem, misinformation, disinformation, just kind of ending up with this blah kind of ecosystem where it's all this, Mid-Journey images everywhere and they're all kind of boring. The breakdown of kind of the existing copyright functioning, the ability to own and fund media, to make media and make money off of media because everybody's just kind of sucking the good stuff out of it and using it to paraphrase or refactor or mix and match. Bias, there's a lot of discussion on bias in models, but there's other kinds of bias here as well. The way the models are used has a bias. There's a lot of apps being developed. They're all of a certain kind. There's other uses that might be more kind of valuable in certain parts of the world or certain demographics or situations that maybe are not being made. Or the use of the models by publics, right? How people are choosing to use these. It might be one of these things like contactless cash, where you kind of have to use these tools, because if you don't, you're kind of not in the conversation. Uncertainty in digital relationships. I'm going to guess some of you here have had this experience that I've had, where you're on a chat interface getting some help on a website, and you kind of get annoyed, and you say, "Are you real?" And it turns out the person is real. Because you don't know whether you're dealing with a chatbot or you're dealing with a person. And I've had that happen a couple times. So this idea of uncertainty in digital relationships, I think there's a real good case for prohibiting representing an AI as a person without sort of disclosing or being transparent about that. This sort of vagueness of accountability. Well, computer says no, but on a vastly more impactful scale. This thing of becoming dependent on these machines or these models, and also becoming dependent on something that's opaque, that you don't really know, where it's coming from, how it's working, what's behind it. This combination of being dependent on something that you don't understand or don't have the agency to sort of get into the details of what's going on. In news specifically, the potential to lose a permanent record. If you've got all of this language that's being kind of sucked out of the ether and combined and sort of created just for an experience, and then it dissolves and goes away, what does that do for a permanent record? What happens when you want to find out what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Just say you're in 2040 and you want to find out what happened in 2030. Are there articles? Are there videos? Are they all just kind of moving and mixing and matching? What's the canonical source? What is that? It might not be an article. If not, what's it going to be? Information inequality, right? So inequality kind of at a vast scale, where some people have this sort of James Bond villain godlike omnipotence over everything, and everybody else gets sort of this sort of wave of AI generated spam. Something like that you could see developing. And there's a whole other list of harms. So lots and lots of harms here. Taken to the extreme, kind of got to talk about the existential risk thing. I'll just do this very briefly, because I think it gets maybe a little too much play, but I'll just deal with it briefly. Let's look at it in terms of comparing the impact, high impact, low impact, with low probability and high probability. Again, we're talking about existential risk here, so this is all bad. The impact here is all bad, but just like in relative terms. You can kind of map things out. This is not complete. I'm not an expert on AI harms or existential risk, but roughly you can look at these kind of science fiction type risks. The Matrix, the Skynet, and the Terminator, or the paperclip maximizer. This is where you have an AI and its job is to make paperclips, and it goes around killing everybody to make paperclips out of their fillings. That kind of a thing. These are largely, I think, I'm not saying these are fiction. I'm saying that they're kind of coming from a science fiction kind of a familiarity. They're non-zero probability, but probably very low probability. But the impact would be very high if they happened. There's another set of risks here that are more kind of political risks. The whole AI and warfare of various kinds is part of this. There's a whole bunch of risks around extreme economic inequality, and if we don't get things like universal basic income in place and so on, political instability at a vast scale, we'll call these political risks. But for this talk, I'm kind of more interested in this set down here. These are high probability, reasonably low impact. But remember, we're talking about existential risks here. So, that low impact is existential. And this is like mass loss of agency, right? Kind of mass insanity, distraction at sort of a scale we've never seen before. Just losing the ability to understand the world. Boredom and apathy. Just sitting here watching stand-up specials 24/7 or whatever. Netflix on steroids. Or even things like interactive grooming, radicalization, where you have these conversational, kind of manipulation potentials, and there's many more of these. So these are kind of like more media-related risks. So there's there's a lot here. And I think for the media side of things, the media is a significant part of this debate around AI safety. We've got that conference that's coming up in Bletchley Park in about a month. That's going to get a lot of play around existential risk, and I really think media is part of that. Let's end on a positive note. What might go right? I think there's some big things that might go right. I think there's a real case here that we all become vastly better informed with this stuff. That everybody gets news in exactly the way they want it. That the whole, news right now is kind of produced for educated people in big cities that love text, love reading and writing. That is not most of the population. News avoidance is a huge, big problem. Most people don't get access to news in the way that I think most people in this room would get. But what happens if you could have your news as a comic or as a video or as whatever personality you wanted to, and have that at scale? News might be much more accessible to more people. There's a whole realm of civic information that is really, really hard for people to access, but that impacts their daily life very, very much. What's happening with, local stuff, wheelie bins or, transport or, investment in, water quality or school quality or, unemployment in the area or, all of these things that are, kind of locked away in data sets or kind of small little, court documents or whatever it is. We might be able to get that, translated into a way or a form that's accessible to everybody. And this idea of transparency. There's a lot of stuff now that's like technically public, but it's not really public because you have to wade through, arcane little documents to find it. Maybe things become much more transparent. Maybe individuals have more agency in this world. Some of the more astounding uses I've seen, like practically, of this is people who are maybe not very literate, like not very good at writing. Maybe their English is a second language, or they're just not very good with words. Being able to take what they can write, put it into GPT-4 or ChatGPT, and get it turned into very fluid English. And I've seen this again and again and again. And it's a huge, huge boon for these people who've struggled with communicating and writing, in their emails, and they've always felt this sort of insecurity around their writing skills and all that. And all of a sudden they can write. Like they can write fluidly as well as anybody else. And this, you could see the same in filmmaking. I'm never going to make a film if it involves doing the stuff that you have to do to make a film now. But in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, if I have a spare weekend and it looks like fun, heck, I'd like to make a film. And I think there's a whole range of these things where there's just this potential that kind of blossoms, including in education. There's loads and loads of ways where this kind of works in a very positive way to help us, personal tutors and all this kind of thing. And then maybe we'll have more time. Maybe if these tools can do more of the work, universal basic income, perhaps, life coaching, motivation, having I know from my desperate attempts at trying to, eat less and exercise more, that having somebody nagging at me in a gentle way, in a way that fits, makes a difference. Maybe we all get that. Maybe we all get a butler. Maybe we get staff. Maybe we all have admin assistants at our beck and call. Maybe there's more empowerment that comes from that. So I'm going to end, this is my last slide, and this kind of is a little different. So this is a poem, and so it's a poem that was written in 1969 by Ray Bradbury, the science fiction author, called Night Call Collect. And it's from a short story called Night Call Collect. The poem is in the short story, and this is from a book of short stories called I Sing the Body Electric. And so there's this character in the story, and I won't go into the details, but this character is kind of stranded on Mars on his own. And he kind of grows old on Mars, and then the phone rings basically one night. But this poem is kind of interesting here because in 1969, Ray Bradbury very eloquently describes essentially the moment we're in, describes large language models, describes how they're trained, describes the implications, this weird combination of amazement and sort of unsettledness that we get from this. And he described it in this poem. And so in 1969, and so what I've done here is I've taken, I've created a prompt, I put it into Midjourney, I've created an image of what I thought the character in this short story looked like, with his little Mars outfit there, and then I put it into DID and I've animated it, and I've had the 11 Lab synthetic voice read the poem. So I'm going to finish with the reading of Ray Bradbury's Night Call Collect. Now, we have this technical issue with the cutting out, so you might not get all of it. But I've got it on my Twitter. We'll put it on the website so you can listen to it later. But here goes.
Suppose, and then suppose, and then suppose that wires on the far-slung telephone black poles sopped up the billion-flooded words they heard each night, all night, and saved the sense and meaning of it all. Then, jigsaw in the night, put all together and, in philosophic phase, tried words like moron child, thus mindless beast, all treasuring of vowels and consonants, saves up a miracle of bad advice and lets it filter, whisper, heartbeat out, one lisping murmur at a time. So, one night soon, someone sits up, hears sharp bell ring, lifts phone, and hears a voice like Holy Ghost gone far in nebulae. That beast upon the wire, which with sibilance and savourings down continental madnesses of time, says hell and oh and then hello. To such creation, such dumb, brute, lost, electric beast. What is your wise reply?
So that's it. I think that's the question that we're all going to be struggling with for a little while here. So, sorry for going a little over here.
Thank you so much for a brilliant talk. It was really, really great to listen to you. I was kind of waiting for the big revelation at the end of the talk that you generated your entire talk with AI. But my question is, why didn't you?
So I don't want to. I mean, I did a big article about this stuff that was published a couple of weeks ago, and I did it all by hand. And at the bottom, I said this was all done by hand. I think it's important that we do things ourselves. I think it is important that we retain agency. I would think it's important that we think through and develop sort of models in our mind of what we're doing and why, and keep that. And so, personally, I've kind of made a decision. I actually do this with Google Maps too. Like I will use GPS and Google Maps, but I will navigate by maps, proper maps, and just keep that sensibility of I can do this myself and understand it myself, rather than rely on a machine to say left or right or, produce slides or whatever it happens to be. So I think we're all going to have to make these kind of decisions about how much agency we want to keep, how much we want to pass over to the machine. And I think there's ways where you can use the power of the machines, but keep agency over how you use them. So.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Really inspiring. I'm a filmmaker, so I'm really disturbed by what you've shown, and also putting together.
But maybe you can do a lot with that yourself.
You can do a lot with it, but also putting together. I've done an online learning course in filmmaking, and thinking about how this would relate to putting together a film school, which is what we're trying to do relating to that. I'm not trying to promote this. I'm just trying to think that what I'm learning from people I'm talking to here as well about AI and the potential of it, or the potential development, is that we have a role to play perhaps in the teaching of it and teaching AI how to respond.
Absolutely.
That's where the jobs in the future might be. Yeah. Is that true, do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's true, but I think it is. Like I think, excuse me, I think there's a lot that remains the same. Like these are tools, and we can use these tools, and there are things that we kind of understand about how we use the tools that will change. So, for example, we might be able to do with making a feature film in an afternoon. We might be able to do like a nice little formulaic, recognizable, waste a couple of hours feature film. But we're not going to do creative stuff. We're not going to change the medium. We're not going to sort of do new things with cinema or new things with video that we could never do before. To do that, you have to stand back and decide to use the tool in a certain way, including imagining new ways to use the tool and new ways to create the media using the tool. So, I think a lot of this stuff, the jobs are going to be very different, and the ways we use the tool are going to be very different. But we're going to develop all of these new things that we can do that are going to fill our time and bring us value, it's a debate about it's this lump of labor fallacy that sometimes the economists talk about here, about whether this is going to play out in the same way that it's done with other kinds of automation and industrialization and so on. And the sort of the history is that when we get new tools, we invent new needs and new ways to use the tools. And then there's another school of thought that is that this time is different. But every other time this has happened, there's been similar critiques. But personally, I think that we will adapt, and we will use these tools. We will create new things. We'll have whole new needs, whole new jobs. It'll just be another higher level of abstraction of what we're doing now. So.
We have one more question we're going to take online, and then you guys can ask all your questions afterwards in the lounge if we have time. But I'm just wary that we're running over a bit. So,
Okay, yeah, thank you. There's lots of thank yous on the online feed. I'm going to combine two questions, if that's okay, about data integrity. So, someone's kind of observed that when they're watching the news online, that what's reported at 12 o'clock seems to be a regurgitation and maybe an add-on of what's been reported at 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock maybe in the breakfast TV programmes. Yep. And they're saying, how do we make sure we can retain trust in our news outlets if this continues? Because it's like they're saying it's reflection, it's the self-generation of news, if you like. And then linked to that, someone else is asking, how do we make sure that kind of organisations are not creating fake news? What can we do? What are your thoughts?
Well, so just to be completely clear, there are no serious news producing organizations that are using these tools to do this stuff now. There's lots of experimentation. There are some back-end tasks that are being done, but like producing news from this stuff, that's not happening yet. And it may never happen. And one of the reasons it may never happen is because retaining that control and that certainty and that trust and that verification and validation, that's going to be a very valuable thing, or that's probably going to be a very valuable thing. The BBC, for example, they have launched, this just in the last year, this very significant program called BBC Verify, and it's about doubling down on the core function here is to verify truth. And that's a very smart thing to do in an environment where there might be a lot of uncertainty about, is that real? Did that really happen? And so I think the news organizations, and that's kind of who I deal with and kind of work with day to day. I think they're very aware of this. They're very aware about retaining those values and public trust. They will be very cautious, and rightly so, in using these tools. There's a lot of positive things that news organizations can do with these tools, but and they will explore those. But I think news organizations will be quite conservative, and appropriately so, in using these. But there's others out there that will do news-like things, right? That don't have that tradition and those values and all that. So the environment itself might be a different thing than the established news producers. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, David.
You're very welcome.
Big applause. Yeah, sit down, relax, before everyone is going to bombard you later in the lounge. Just very quickly, I know you guys have to rush off online as well as offline, so I'm going to go through this very quickly, but more exciting events are going to come up in November. The next one in this series, in this AI speaker series, we don't have a barcode yet or anything you can log into. It will appear next week, and everyone who's registering with us, you will get automatically an email about this. It's going to be Bo Bergstedt, and he's going to fly in from Copenhagen for our event, and the event will take place in King's Manor in the city centre. So again, we're trying to keep this speaker series quite alive and all over the place. So it's going to move to different institutes, which should be quite interesting for everyone. So it's not always going to be easy to maybe find the place, but hang in there, you got this. Except for the people online, you can just click a button. Another event we have in November, it's an offline event, so I'm sorry everyone who's online. It's going to be in Sparks, and it's going to be unrelated to the AI speaker series, but it's another one we're quite passionate about. I just thought I'd put it out there, especially for businesses who are thinking potentially about internationalization, but also domestically how to get into supermarkets. Paul and his colleague will be joining us for a talk in Sparks. So again, off campus, different environment, and just getting together and having a really interesting talk, and also having a chat with them afterwards. Again, I can only stress how important it is for us to organize these events, that you please scan the code if you can, and kind of just fill in all the questions so we can continue doing this and stay in touch with you, because we're only doing this if you actually allow us to. So please, if you want to be contacted about upcoming events in this AI speaker series, please try to scan the barcode. If anyone has issues, send us an email and we'll send it out to you afterwards. As I said, the last couple of questions will be for us to just keep on track and try to attract more sponsors, because these events aren't cheap. Just to kind of get everyone into the mood. This was daunting for some of us. I saw the faces when I looked around. We're all on this together. So the school has a lot of academics who are working on this as well, and they're really keen for you to approach them. So for example, Anja and NSB recently talked about examining trust and willingness to accept AI recommendation systems. And then Beatrice has and is actually currently doing a lot of work with the BBC to kind of look into the digitalization and how that's affecting people at work, but also looking into how AI is affecting innovative product development. Because how do you come up with new ideas using AI? Pretty interesting question, considering it's learning from us. Then Phil is working with the Institute of Safe Autonomy, and I can give it away to you guys now. The Institute of Safe Autonomy is going to be our venue for the third event, and that's awesome. They have robots, they have lasers, they're super interesting, and they're going to be hosting us, and they're already working with Phil on this kind of topic. And another one, last but not least, is Dr. Allison, and she's also working on a collaboration with different universities across the country. So there's a lot going on, and people want to connect with you guys. Finally, and I'm almost done, please hang in there, the university is offering other ways to get in touch with us and look into MOOCs, free online courses, freely available to all of you to access online and offline. Well, they're taking place online. But we also have masterclasses. Again, really interesting guest speakers coming on campus, trying to engage with the community, and obviously the Festival of Ideas. So a lot of ways to stay in touch, and for students to pimp your CV, having something interesting to say. For everyone else, it's just really interesting speakers who are coming in for us. So if anyone has any questions, maybe wants to sponsor one of these events, wants to engage, please send me an email. I'm here for you. And now a massive thank you. First of all, obviously, to David for coming all the way and enjoying the weather here with us. Kath and Grace, who are basically the superwomen behind this, because they did all the admin behind the scenes, and it would have been impossible without them. So big thank you to them. Bo, Dottie, and Caroline and Chris, who were kind enough. Caroline is here today, also functioning on the web, Zoom web. But they basically gave us the money for this, trusting that this would somehow come together. Hayden, who's taking the pictures for us today. So thank you, Hayden. Very kind. AV support, Craig is in the back, running all of this. All the pictures on my slides are not from AI generators, as far as I know. They're just from Pixabay, but they're freely accessible, so I just thought I'd mention it. And the biggest thank you goes out to all of you guys coming here today, on and offline, giving us your time and actually joining in, because without you, we wouldn't be able to organize these events, and I find them really interesting. So thank you to everyone. Final time, the barcode. Everyone who is physically here, go, have a drink and relax. Everyone online, switch off the computers and discover the real world for a couple of minutes if you have time. Thank you all, and now off you go.